Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Financial Clarity for Doctors. Rachelle Vanderzanden here with Corey Janoff.
Hello.
Yep. Today we are joined by a very special guest. We have Aussie Doc from the Aussie Doc Freedom blog. You can find her online at that email or blog address, Aussie Doc Freedom. We're really excited to have her on the show and tell us a little bit or talk to us a little bit about investors and female investors and financial literacy and all kinds of things. So Aussie Doc, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rachelle and Corey, for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited.
Good.
Yes,
I'm glad you're here.
To talk to you.
Yeah. Before we start asking you a whole bunch of questions, we kind of wanted you to just give us a little bit of background on yourself. Like tell us who you are, what you do, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. I'm a doctor, senior doctor over in Australia. I work in emergency, and I've been doing that for quite a few years. I'm from the UK originally, so I'm an immigrant to this country. But I have started a finance blog as a little bit of a hobby project on the side. Really frustrated by my initial attempts to engage financial professionals in Australia and work out what I'm doing really with my finances, and realizing I had to learn it all. So I basically did so much research that I thought I might as well put it on a little website and get that going as well.
Yeah, get some information out to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
There's
guess
not that much. Yeah.
When did that start, and I guess when did you kind of get on that mission to become more informed and take control of your own finances?
Yeah, so I guess even when I first qualified back in the UK, I remember feeling like I was in a hell of a lot of debt, and I mean, in comparison with my US colleagues, absolutely wasn't in a lot of debt, but it felt like a huge amount of debt at the time, and that seemed quite scary, and I sort of wanted to get a good start. But there wasn't really anything around. I didn't actually have any money at the time. So for somebody who had no money and just wanted to do the right things with their first paychecks and get into a good habit, there wasn't a lot around at that time. That was back in 2004 in the UK. Then I sort of got to the point where my income increased over here. I was training and feeling like I was becoming a proper grown-up, getting to that age where you feel like you've got to start doing responsible things, and thought, well, again, I've got to dig in and work out what I need to do with my finances, because I'm getting to that age now. So I went to a financial planner because that seemed like the responsible thing to do. But I didn't have a great experience. The fees were very high, and I sort of undid everything that I ended up signing up with him, and realised that I really had to understand it myself as well. Even if I was going to get professional help in, you kind of can't outsource it completely. You have to have an understanding of the finances yourself and educate yourself to know what you're doing. And it is something I've always been interested in. So I've always read finance books and property investing books. And so I started the blog in about August 2019, after quite a long time of it sort of just being an idea in the back of my mind. And yeah, I've been going from there.
I feel like you just described so many of our clients.
Really? Yes.
Yeah, just people who don't necessarily have a ton of resources. They're still in training, but they want to learn more and they don't really know where to turn or where to look. But yeah.
Yeah, I find like in Australia, until you've got a lot of money, it's not really worth seeing a financial advisor because the fees are very high, and a lot of the rules that have been put in place to protect consumers actually increase the prices massively, and so could seem to compound the problem. Exactly that. I don't know what the situation's like in the US for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of varies, but I think that's one of the biggest deterrents is people say cost. I know we have a program where for residents and fellows, so in their medical training, we waive fees for our time and advice and meetings for them, kind of like a goodwill, if you will, and build that relationship up and provide a good educational experience for those in training. But yeah, to your point, for some folks, if they have to pay a large cost, especially if they're not in a real good position to do a whole lot. It can be a big deterrent, absolutely. And totally agree with your point about having an understanding, even if you don't have a passion for the subject, at least getting a general foundation so you understand why you're doing certain things. That way you can actually follow through on it. Because at the end of the day, the financial advisor is just the coach, and ultimately you have to go out and execute the game plan. And if you don't know why or how you're supposed to do it, it's kind of makes it more difficult. So
Yeah, I guess it's similar to in medicine. You wouldn't expect your patients to just completely swallow everything you say. You expect them to learn a little bit and understand why you're recommending the treatment that you are, so that they are engaged and know what they're doing as well.
absolutely.
Definitely. Was there anything in particular that led you to first learn more about finances? Like, I understand that you wanted to adult better and you wanted to just like take control of your finances, but were there any particular topics where it was just like, I'm very interested in this. I really want to learn about this?
Initially, it was the debt payoff from I think it probably is generally debt. So it was the student loans initially, and then taking on the mortgage, and suddenly feel like I've got a huge debt again, and being interested in getting rid of that.
There we
Yeah.
go.
I think that can be a big driver for a lot of people, especially here. Like you said, student loans here are pretty intense for a lot of people. And I think that's a big reason that people seek out advice here.
Yeah, like a nightmare.
And I think what led us to connect with you is we read one of your blog posts that appeared on the White Coat Investor website about financial literacy and a lot of focus on women investors, which we'll talk a little bit about. But I think a lot of the themes in that were studies based on the Standard & Poor's, some of their research, and that how overall women respondents are a little less financially literate than men in both developed and developing economies. And what do you think some of the reasons are for that, and are there ways to potentially change that?
In terms of the financial literacy, I think it is improving from other data that I've looked at. So there's been a study of schools of 15-year-olds in 115 countries that actually showed that the gap between males and females was very minimal at that age. Whether that changes as they get older, not sure. But it does look like it has narrowed a little over the years. I think it's probably partially a tradition, a sort of hangover from the tradition of the males going to work and earning the money and learning all about the money, and the women having the more at-home traditional. I think it's just taking probably time to change mindsets, in that this is something that women should and can and should be really interested in, and it's sort of seen as a male world still. And that's certainly, I find, what I see when I see websites targeted at me. It's all about shopping and coupons and that sort of
Budgeting.
traditional female role things, whereas I am the primary earner and I manage all the money.
Yeah. I do think there's also a big lack of role models that are female in the finance space. Like you can see a lot of large tycoons that make a bunch of money, like the Jeff Bezos of the world, and there are not very many female equivalents to that. Um, I think we're starting to see some of that, but not nearly as much. And there just aren't as many people that are in those positions of power that women identify with. But I think that'll start to change too over time, but it's obviously a big lag there.
Yeah, hopefully there's been a lot of literature in there, hasn't there, about how there are very few females in the sort of higher ranks of financial companies, and how companies have been trying to improve that, but they don't really know how, I don't think. And despite there being a fair number of junior women, they're not really going up the ranks the same as men. And so it's hard to be what you can't see, I think, because you do follow role models. I know at work with junior doctors, they all generally look for role models of the same gender. So the young female doctors look up to the older female, more experienced female doctors, and if they want to have kids, particularly for women with kids. So they're looking for somebody who is living the sort of life that they want to be and they can identify with. And I think it's probably similar in finance.
That's part of the reason that I love your blog so much, because we've interviewed a few bloggers on our podcast here, and you're definitely the first female blogger and definitely the first female blogger that I've seen blogging about finance specifically. Like there's lots of podcasts and blogs out there, but not a lot of people in this space. But
And it's so interesting. I don't know why people aren't more interested. Women aren't more interested. They should be. You know, women on average have less money than men as well. And I think having good financial literacy is even more critical if you don't have that much money, because we actually all make financial decisions every day. And making the wrong choices, even though they don't seem that significant over a long period of time, makes a huge difference. So that financial literacy is really having an impact whether you know it or not.
it's actually really encouraging to hear that in younger ages it's become more, I don't know, somewhat equal at least. That's encouraging to hear.
Mm.
I know you mentioned how some of it might be rooted in just the traditional values where the man goes and works and makes the money and the woman's more of the caretaker at home. Like, what about like amongst social circles? Like I know with my friends, money topics they come up commonly and they're openly discussed. But for women, you guys can probably talk more than I can about it. But do women talk money? Is it just still a very taboo subject?
I think it's hard to generalize, but I'm a financial advisor and I don't feel like I talk about money with my female friends. And I think that probably says something. I
That
tell
says
them,
a lot.
I know, right? And I like
Mm.
maybe we touch on it a tiny bit, but I feel like it circles more around policy issues and things like that, and not necessarily personal finance. Um, and yeah, I don't know why. Like you're saying, Corey, like men will sit around and talk about their investments. I think we actually posted an article about that on one of our socials. I don't remember what it was, but it was basically saying like, hey, ladies, you should talk about your investments. Like, take some pride in what you're doing and chat with other people about what they're doing because maybe they have some good ideas too. But it is
Yeah,
weird.
I don't find people talk about money much at work. I think maybe in medicine it's even more of a taboo topic, but I would have thought being a financial professional that
I
would be very
know.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a very high level conversations if there are conversations. It's not necessarily about personal finances for sure. But yeah, I know I really enjoyed the article that you did write about female investors because I mean, we exist. It's a real thing. But there's obviously some things that women do a little bit differently than men when we're approaching investing. So what are the things that you learned that women potentially do different and that other people can potentially learn from?
Yeah, I was really surprised about this because I had never heard of it just in my general reading and things until I thought about the fact that the differences in personality commonly, and I'm stereotyping. There are certainly exceptions, but um, the overconfidence in young men is really, really typical. And I find it's usually the young men at work. I have to say, calm down. You're good, but you're not quite as good as you think you are. Just settle and you're still learning. And it's the young women that I'm having to say, you're doing really good, and give a little pep talk to try and encourage them to blossom in their confidence a little bit. That led me to think that, there's a lot of men online, and even the ones that do mention at work are always men about finances. And it's always it's quite often something quite speculative, Bitcoin interest, or the latest hot thing that's going on. And it just made me think that my guess would be that men would be quite impulsive in general, and that women are often afraid to get into the stock market, which is the big problem. But the ones that do actually seem to perform better than men more often. And the major thing with that is lack of trading frequency. So women trade significantly less than men in multiple studies. And that really is the most powerful factor in the investment return differences. They're not chopping and changing. They are either sticking with a simple index fund or what you call dated fund, age target funds, or if they're picking individual stocks, they tend to spend longer learning and reading and making decisions carefully and then stick with them for longer. Was my impression from the literature that I found. I was surprised how much there actually was that backed up my hunch, which is interesting. So the main things were trading less, less overconfidence. They're less likely to take on a lot of risk, which holds women back in actually getting into the market. But when they're in the market, they don't tend to take excessive risk. Yeah.
I love that
That's pretty
point
cool.
about the trading frequency. There's so many studies out there that show the less you trade your accounts, heck, even the less you look at your accounts, the better off you'll do. I think Warren Buffett, I love one, he has a bunch of great quotes, but one of his best ones is our investment strategy is lethargy bordering on sloth. Just buy whatever you think is good and just let it go for 30 years. And 30 years from now, it'll probably be worth more. No guarantees, of course, but if it's, like you said, a diversified index fund or broadly allocated portfolio, not some random speculative gamble, but a more, a sound investment, then yeah, it should grow in value over a long period of time. Just let it do its thing.
I love
There
that
was
we've
this,
used
there
the
was,
word speculative. Speculative is amazing and such a good descriptor. And I do feel like there's so many people that are engaging in that kind of thing without even realizing they're doing it. Like they don't understand that they're just taking some big risks there. But I'm sorry about
yeah.
that, Aussie Doc. What were you going to say?
Um, there was a study, I can't remember which one, but that said that the best investors had actually died. When they looked back at the accounts, they were the dead investors that performed best because they didn't log into their accounts.
Yes.
Was that, I
So
think that was
good.
a Fidelity study, wasn't it? Of like all of the Fidelity accounts, or
Right,
I feel like
okay, yep.
yeah, I think
I
I've
read it
seen that
somewhere, but I
before.
can't remember where.
hmm Yeah, so interesting.
So we have, less trading, less, overconfidence and speculative risk. Anything else that women investors do well that everyone can potentially learn from? Or are those the two big
Um,
ones?
those were the two big ones, really, yeah. Um, they were slightly more likely to go with the kind of set funds rather than individual shares as well. And I think there's quite a lot of research to say that most investors don't do well picking individual shares.
Yes. Was there anything that men do well that everyone could learn from and try and emulate or not?
I think the main thing is actually getting in and investing, because most women will fill up their, I don't know if you have bank accounts or offset accounts, and they'll hoard cash. And I have to sort of get rid of that tendency a little bit as well because cash feels safe. And men being willing to take on that bit of risk obviously does well for them because if you're not in the game, then you know you're not getting any returns, are you? Especially not with inflation.
For sure. So you got to have at least that baseline level of confidence and take the leap of faith initially, and then from there, slow down. Don't get
Yeah.
too crazy.
I like it. I think we've talked about this a little bit already, but just getting back to the topic of financial literacy, how do you think we can make it more approachable and attainable for everyone? For folks like us who are trying to get information out there, like how do we make it, I don't know, more palatable?
Um, I think really it's got to appeal to women, and a lot of the stuff that is designed to appeal from women makes me cringe completely. I was speaking to another blogger here in Australia the other day, and he mentioned this website, and that was obviously designed for women, and it's sort of I think its catchphrase was something along the lines of get your financial plan so good that it fits like your favorite pair of jeans or something. And I just thought, oh, it doesn't need to be dumbed down. Women don't, I believe, they don't have a lower IQ than men on average, as far as I know. I'm not sure, but not
You might go
noticeably.
the other way around. Just
Right, okay. Um, so yeah, I think it's a fine line to walk, isn't it? Trying to appeal to women, but not going overboard with the, oh, women like makeup and shoes and clothes, and we're all like that, because maybe the ones that are interested in finance and have some money, maybe feel a little bit patronised by that kind of stuff. How to make it more approachable? I think really because anybody providing financial education has got a sort of alternate interest as well, like the blog. Obviously, I plan to monetize that. Yeah, you have to sort of be a little bit aware of. There's always a conflict of interest in there somewhere with any free information. So I feel like it's got to be really in schools, and it's got to be unbiased education in schools and from parents that have financial literacy, passing them on to their children so that they're getting a basic financial education that's unbiased, and then they can use that other information but sort of be more aware of the little bits to watch out for that have little conflicts of interest.
Yeah,
it's
I
amazing.
do.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Rochelle.
go ahead. I'm always surprised when we're dealing with really, really young trainees coming out of medical school that have so little financial knowledge. It just seems like, they're on this very specific career path, and there's so much that I think that a medical school, for example, could do for them that would be tailored to their individual circumstances, or maybe not their individual circumstances, but to the circumstances they're likely to face. And it's not really a thing that commonly happens. Once in a great while I come across an institution where I'm like, wow, you actually got a lot of good information from your institution, and it makes me feel really happy, but it is not widespread. And I do think that that would be a great way to start making things better for doctors at least. But
That would be amazing to have some information coming through medical school, because I think the kind of kids that are attracted into medical school, um, well, they're a bit like myself, and my husband often tells me the world isn't made of unicorns and fairies. Aussie Doc, you just have to be a bit more realistic and a little bit more suspicious and a little less naive. So they go in with this naive idea about saving the world, and saving lives and helping people, and very starry-eyed, and sort of not really very well prepared at all, because then they get a big income, and they just don't know what to do with it really. And they're quite vulnerable. So there's been a lot of scams over the years, targeting doctors as well, things on Facebook and things like that. So they need to be very aware of that kind of thing.
I would say it
yeah,
needs to start way sooner than med school. Like get it in elementary schools, grade schools, high school at the latest. Like I remember, and it's not a secret. Like everyone talks about how we need more financial education in schools. Like when I was in high school, I think we had like one day where we talked about credit cards and interest and stuff, but it wasn't like part of the normal curriculum. So if you can establish some of those educational habits earlier and instill that knowledge in people sooner, it'll benefit everyone in society as a whole.
yeah.
What's even
And
more worrying is when that one class is provided by the bank providing the credit card.
No, yeah, right. This was actually just one of, I forget which class it was, but just the teacher had like an
For
interest
the
in it. It was
teacher,
like, you
that's
guys
good.
need to learn about this stuff. You're about to graduate in a few months. You need to learn about credit cards and how not to, get in a pile of credit card debt. And this was before, I mean, this was back when a student with no income could open a credit card with a $20,000 limit. Like this was pre-financial crisis before they put some of those restrictions in place. So it's like, but yeah, we need more education earlier in terms of
Yeah,
finances.
so
I
easy
think
to
you
get
need
into trouble with
repetition.
that.
Yeah, I think you need repetition too. Like people, you can't hear it once and then internalize it and know how to apply it through the rest of your life. That's just not how people learn things. So, people need to be told a few different times at least about some of these really, really big topics. But yeah, how do you think we can get more female role models into the investing and finance space? How do we recruit more Aussie docs?
Oh. One is, well, I was thinking you were talking about in the finance profession, but there has
Both.
to be both. Yeah, the women need to feel welcome to enter a profession, and really, I'm taking my knowledge of medical specialties that are particularly male dominated and their experience in trying to improve it. There's not that many women still in senior leadership in medicine. They're still underrepresented, but nothing in comparison with the finance. It's far more equitable. But there are certain specialities that are worse than others. Women need to feel welcome in that profession. So recruitment campaigns need to include women. I'm not talking about advertising them alongside high heels or something, but actually including women as the role model in the recruitment campaign. And I think people need to be careful about the way they speak to potential women that are interested in finance, because certainly in surgery, the bugbear has been people telling junior medical students and junior doctors, oh, women really, oh, do you want kids? Well, you shouldn't do surgery. You can't do surgery and have kids, which is completely untrue. But that sort of off-putting language can be a big problem. So I think the way we talk to people that are interested in finance and encourage that among women as well as men. And then just really raising up women role model, the odd one woman role model that occurs, they sort of should be celebrated and advertised as much as possible to encourage a few more to come through, because when you see those role models, you are encouraged a little bit.
Yeah, I think financial services is a really interesting industry, and I'm sure that it's different from one country to the next. So I actually I don't know how it is in Australia, but I do know that there's a perception that it's a lot of work, which it is, and that, women can't put in the hours to make it work because they have other obligations and things like that. But I think that it can be much more flexible than that, and it just kind of depends on where you land. And I think that firms can do a lot on their end to make it more accessible for women and make it a better career fit for them. And I think like having a diversity of voices at the firm level with advisors is very helpful. Like there's a lot of different voices, and obviously not all of our clients are men, and it doesn't mean that every man wants to work with a man and every woman wants to work with a woman, but we definitely come across women once in a while that do want to work with a female advisor just because they feel like they can relate better or something like that. But I don't know, it's a really interesting dynamic. There's a lot that you can talk about, and you can stick your foot in your mouth, and like I can stick my foot in my mouth, and I am a woman, so it's hard, but
I
yeah, we have
think
to keep trying.
because finance is such a male, like traditional male domain, I think women find it harder to speak to men about that, and express their own, their goals and things like that. Whereas they feel perhaps more able to speak to a woman. I certainly and would feel more comfortable speaking to a woman advisor, and I think that would attract a lot more women investors to be able to speak to women financial advisors. I had a recent experience that was absolutely terrible with a property advisory firm. The property advisory firm was great, but the first person I interacted with was a male who kept speaking over the top of me, and I found quite condescending, and I was really, really put off. And you just don't need that. I think firms need to obviously, use maternity leave. That's sort of essential to attract women. It's far better supported here in Australia than I believe it is in America. But also paternity leave. So, men have babies too, and men should have that access to care, because some of the stuff is actually societal based, isn't it? That women are expected to do a lot more of the childcare and the home stuff. And if we're going to change that, we're going to have to encourage men to do some more of the childcare as well. So flexibility in allowing men to take parental leave as well as women, and flexible work practices so that women and men can work around their home life as well.
I think that has been such a huge thing over the past year, like for women, like being kind of bumped out of the workforce because they were the ones that had to take on that care. And we experienced it firsthand in our home because at the beginning, our daughter, who's 5.5, was home with us for 2.5 months straight. And like the assumption from my husband's work was that he could do the same level of work that he was going to do before. It didn't matter that he was at home with a 5.5-year-old. So really, I was the one that had to be flexible because that was the expectation for him. And that was really challenging. And I do think that's very common that we don't necessarily give dads the room that they need to parent. Like it can be really
Yeah.
challenging. Yeah.
Funny, that's the automatic assumption that it will be the mother that deals with it all.
Right. And I do think
We
some
often
employers
have
are better
professional
than
careers.
others. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh man, all of this stuff is so crazy.
Are
What
I
they
is
like
back
the
at school now?
Yes, yeah. So she actually got to go to preschool last year. She wasn't quite old enough for public school or kindergarten, and it reopened last July. And I've never been happier to pay for preschool in my life. I will tell you that. But yes,
It becomes quite a luxury to be able to work uninterrupted, doesn't it?
absolutely, it
Feels
does.
like a treat.
It does. It does.
That's why I
Yep.
came into the office today rather than working at home with two little ones. So,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They don't really understand boundaries, do they? And yeah,
No,
at all.
they really don't.
I had to give evidence for a court case recently, and that's not unusual. People come in, they get assaulted, and they call the doctor to court, which is incredibly annoying, um, and ask you basically to read your notes. But they let you give phone evidence a lot of the time, which at least means you don't have to actually rock up to court and get really nervous because I'm not a good public speaker. And the children were home from school because I can't remember whether it was COVID related or they were sick or something. The children were home from school and they're quite little still. And I said, look, I tried to explain the gravity of the situation, that there's the whole court listening. And if they come in the thing telling me they need the toilet or something ridiculous, um, that's really not good. But luckily the court case didn't go through because the person pleaded guilty, but my child came in several times with ridiculous complaints. I just thought, oh, can't do this from home with kids.
Yeah, it's hard.
yeah.
I feel like everyone over the past year has a story like that, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I
let's
like,
see.
we
Or
have
go
one
ahead,
more
Rachel.
question, I think, for you. Yeah, go ahead, Corey. No,
I
you
was just
go.
gonna say, yeah, to be mindful of your time to kind of wrap things up. What are some tips you would give your younger self about personal finances or investing?
One would be to not ignore my student loans while I was racking them up. I think I think I fell victim to the sort of thought process of, well, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to earn loads of money. It doesn't matter. I'll pay it off easy peasy. But actually, it doesn't feel so easy when you qualify and you don't earn that much to begin with anyway. So you really want to minimize your loans during your medical school and remember that you do actually have to pay every dollar back. Um, and credit is not a good idea until you've learnt to manage your finances well already. So I really would stop myself from getting that credit card while I was in medical school until I'd worked out how to manage on my meager budget at the time. And also, there's absolutely no point in comparing yourself with others. We all start in different places. Some people are more privileged than others, and it's just wasted effort worrying about the fact that somebody else has got more or whatever. It's up to you what you are going to do with the advantages and the disadvantages that you have been handed.
That's
Love
great
it.
advice. Hmm. So where can people find more of you if they want to read more of your stuff, if they want to listen to your voice some more?
I don't have a podcast. I'm quite an introvert, so I blog quietly behind my screen at Aussie Doc Freedom, AussieDocFreedom.com. It's mainly based on Australian stuff, but I am female. We talk a little bit about maternity leave, women investing. Come check it out.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much for your time. It's great chatting with you.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you guys.
We would love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future topics you'd like us to cover. You can get in touch with the show by emailing podcast@thefinitygroup.com or by following Finity Group on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Finity Group LLC.
You can follow me on Twitter at Corey Janoff CFP, Instagram at Corey Janoff, or on LinkedIn under my name, Corey Janoff.
You can follow me on Twitter at Rachelle Finance, or on Instagram, Vanderzanden Rachelle, or on LinkedIn under my name, Rachelle Vanderzanden.
Check out all of the podcast episodes on the finitygroup.com/podcast, on our Finity Group YouTube channel, or your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to check out our financial clarity blog at thefinitygroup.com/blog.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Financial Clarity for Doctors by Finity Group LLC.